Yeah,
So.
I think just watch that.
Oh, okay. Better leave it.
Okay, ready to start?
Yes.
All right, off we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, thanks for the introduction, and thanks everyone for attending. Well, today I'd like to talk about, well, it's got a very fancy name, Theological Singularity and Ontological Leap. Actually, what I would like to do is to talk about how theology sees intelligence and personhood, and whether we could apply these concepts to machines, to artificial intelligence. Now, I'll try to be as brief as possible with the introduction. First of all, you might be acquainted with the concept of singularity from the previous speakers. This is a concept that was mostly introduced by Ray Kurzweil. Singularity in artificial intelligence philosophy is basically the moment when artificial intelligence reaches human-like levels and exceeds them. So a moment where a computer might become, let's say, self-sufficient or basically better than a human mind. While the ontological leap is once again a concept that we use in theology to explain, let's say, evolution. To say that, well, there was an evolution from ape to man, but at one point there was a grand awakening, a grand difference, a difference in being between what is human and what was before it. There was no easy evolution. There was a brief and sudden moment when human beings became separated from their ancestors. Now, this is interesting because we're going to see if the evolution of artificial intelligence allows for a concept like that. So, science fiction, films, and literature often feature the concepts such as singularity and ontological leap. The rise of self-aware, conscious artificial intelligence systems that are sometimes benevolent, especially in the writings of Isaac Asimov, and more often than not, they are evil. However, they never do explain how this leap occurs. What I'm going to do is to try to explain this. However, since we're talking about something that is that would rightfully be called theology of mind, just like we have philosophy of mind. This paper is probably going to raise more questions than answer them, but that's why I'm looking forward to the Q&A. Anyway, first things first, I would like briefly to talk about complex systems. Now, you're probably wondering, what is this and what does it have to do with theology? Now, complex systems are basically a theory that seeks to explain complex phenomena or systems that are made up of very small parts, many small parts, and they basically have many different properties from the parts that they are made of. And why am I doing this? It's because, well, the scientific revolution that has occurred during modernity has been characterized by measurement and quantization. Starting with the 17th century, we became capable of measuring and quantizing with ever great precision temperature, time, space, current, and force. And obviously, there have been attempts to measure intelligence. However, since the human brain is a complex system, it is not possible to create a strict hierarchy of intelligence. And that's why we consider the human mind and the human brain to be a complex system. Now, these complex systems are characterized by what we call self-organization, which is often spontaneous. This means that just like a brain or a city, if you'd like to see it that way, it is self-organized, so it has various internal structures. The next property is adaptation. The adaptation can refer to the small elements initiating and adapting to changes in the environment, but we're going to see this talks actually about a system being more than the sum of its parts. This is probably the key thing here. Another property got a very complicated name, nonlinearity, which is that the output is not proportional to the input. So whatever you're giving an input, you're giving a signal to let's say to the human mind, it might not come out the way you expect it. You might get a different response, one that is probably unpredictable. And the last property, the one that we're going to use, emergence. Emergence means that there are certain unique characteristics of a big system that are not present at component level. For instance, consciousness. We can talk of consciousness at brain level or mind level, but we cannot talk of consciousness at neuron level or at brain part level. Of course, this was probably foreseen 2,300 years ago by Aristotle, who is also the father of logic, which is the basis of computer science, that the whole is more than the sum of its parts. Now, as of now, artificial intelligence systems are not yet complex systems, although as we are going to see, they are slowly starting to show signs of complexity, especially when we talk about neural networks and machine learning. Next point that I would like to make is from a theological point of view, we can understand the mind as a complex system with two very different modes of knowledge. Humans possess what we call the nous, or the intellect, in intellectus in Latin, which is the oldest faculty of the mind, the more primitive in the sense of fundamental. This one has a direct apprehension of reality. It is intuitive and direct, and it deals with contemplation of mental concepts. It's also considered the eye of the soul, frequently in religious writings. And on the other hand, we have reason, we have dianoia. Both terms come from Greek. They are used in Greek philosophy and also in the New Testament and in early Christian writings. Dianoia is the logical aspects of mind, which is probably what computers are best at emulating. It deals with sensory perception and analysis and operates with symbols and language. Now, in the New Testament, nous is generally used to refer to a special type of thinking concerning mental concepts, which are called noema, and they are usually independent from sensory perception, while dianoia is mostly used to express thought or imagination, usually associated with a degree of intentionality, we could say. Now, one interesting point is that the word for repentance in Greek, in Koine Greek, also comes from the same root. It's called metanoia, and comes from the same word, the verb noeo, which means to understand, to realize. For early Christian writers, dianoia was a mode of operation of the mind that involved mathematical thought and measurement. As I was saying, by collecting information about external objects through sensory data or analyzing information gained through spiritual knowledge. We're going to see, let's see, here it is. Now, this early Christian view is based on Aristotle and Plato as well. There are two quotes here from Aristotle which show us the limits of reason in understanding. First one says that for intellect, so the nous, is concerned with the ultimates, the universals in both directions, and for both the first terms and the last are objects of intellect and not of reasoning. This means that, well, we can talk a lot about things that happen in the middle, but we deliberate not about ends but about means. For the end cannot be a subject of deliberation, but only the means, nor indeed can the particular facts be subject to it. So basically this means that we are operating in a bigger system and that we are never going to find out the basics, the universals. We can just take the information as it is and process it. We're going to see this is a bit important for computers. Now, this translates into another interesting point. You can see here, this is a Lego model of the deep thought machine from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now, the use of nous, the use of intellect, spares us from what we call an infinite regression. Gödel talked about something similar in his theorems of incompleteness. Once again, I'm talking about systems, and I know it's a bit strange, but I hope I will get it cleared by the end of the presentation. A formal system is incomplete in that at least one formula can neither be proved nor disproved. This means that we always need a bigger system of reference. Now, in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, we have an example of this infinite regression in the deep thought supercomputer, which was programmed to calculate the answer to the ultimate question of life. Well, when deep thought comes up with an answer after 6.5 million years, we then realize it doesn't actually know the question. So in order to compute the question correctly, it creates plans for a computer even bigger and more powerful than it, one that is actually a planet, and eventually gets blown up 15 minutes before finding what was the question. Anyway, so human intelligence has this ability to categorize and interpret environment data, and it also, even though it is also a finite automata, just like a computer, it is not only superiorly organized, it is something different. The human mind has an ability to self-program without entering a computing loop. So without having the problems of deep thought, as we've seen, because it has something, a point which is impossible to reach through discursive reasoning, through dianoia, which is present at the level of intuition. This is nous, what we call. Now, given this information, does this mean we can safely reject the possibility of artificial intelligent personhood from a theological point of view, because we can say that simply, well, computers don't have a nous? I'm afraid that the answer is not that simple, because theology sees the cosmos organized in a great chain of being, and what is interesting is that hierarchy is essential to the universe, and when speaking of hierarchy, there is a theory which I think, of course I have to patch different things together here, because no one has ever actually given enough attention to the problem of personhood and intelligence, and if we could apply it to non-human beings. Well, there is an interesting theory, emergentism. Emergentism, which I previously mentioned in our talk about complex systems, affirms that when certain conditions of complexity and interaction, so when something becomes big enough and complex enough, that system acquires new and unexpected properties from the relation between its parts. So I think we have, we're going to see this a bit later. When elements of a certain sort are arranged in the right way, something new comes into being, something that was not there before. Now, we can accept that complexity is a prerequisite of consciousness, but from a theological point of view, the generation of personhood and consciousness is the monopoly of God. So we shouldn't see complexity and emergentism and let's say the generation of a soul, since we're talking about, I feel at liberty here of talking interchangeably between consciousness, between having consciousness and having a soul, because these are not clearly defined in theology in the way that they are defined in philosophy. Of course, soul is not actually well defined anywhere. So we cannot see complexity and ensoulment in a, let's say, in a mechanistic way, in a cause and relationship, cause and effect relationship, because in that way we would risk falling into some sort of evolutionary pantheism that would be apocalyptic and, well, pseudo-scientific. After all, there are various complex systems in our universe. The universe itself and even Earth's climate are considered to be complex systems, but they do not show signs of self-awareness, at least from what we've saw so far. Now, in Genesis 1, God brought into being ex nihilo all the matter, so from nothing he created the universe. And generally we consider that is the whole matter that would ever exist in our cosmos. However, with regards to soul, we don't really know, we don't really have an idea if God has stopped creating souls, if it's an automated process, or if he actually still creates them. Now, that is a true theological question that will probably never get answered. There are two main theories here. One is creationism, that states that all souls are created directly by God. Now, we do know that according to Christian theology, the soul of Adam as the first human was created directly. And the second one is traducianism, which states that souls are generated from the souls of parents. Now, since we would have, in the case we would have a complex system suddenly becoming self-aware, we're pretty safe to affirm that from a religious point of view, its soul would be directly created by God, because it would not have any parents, at least not from its own species. Now, since we accept ensoulment as an act reserved to God, so we say that being complex is a prerequisite, but we still need God's intention to actually ensoul a being. Let us now see what Christian theology affirms in matter of non-human intelligence. Now, this is going to be interesting, something like how many angels can fit on the pin of a needle. But anyway, the first category of beings that we know that are intelligent and non-human are angels. In angelic intelligence, which was mostly described by a 5th century, maybe 6th century, 5th century writer Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, on the celestial hierarchy. Of course, these are some interesting quotes here. Maybe we're not going to delve too much into them. Here we can see that they are brought into being directly by God, and that they use noetic intelligence, so they use intuition, they have a direct apprehension of reality. Now, what is interesting, when we compare angelic intelligence and artificial intelligence, we can see many similarities. We can see that they are both multitasking, they can do many things at once. They both have a hierarchical transmission of ideas or of data. They have built-in information, which for angels we call them innate ideas. But there is one big difference, and that's why I think the model of angels doesn't apply to artificial intelligence. Angelic intelligence is non-local and non-physical, but artificial intelligence is non-local but physical. So AI is not local. A computer program can operate and it can be accessed, if given the infrastructure, from any network terminal. In the case of internet, this means the vast majority of places on Earth, but it is still physical. So the processing and storage power of a computer is what generates and limits an artificial intelligence program. And with all technological innovation, programs are likely to remain hardware-bound in the foreseeable future. Now, since AI is physical, we need to see another model of intelligent being that could apply to our scenario, and this is just going to be short. Whether theology accepts physical, non-human intelligence, and in this case it would probably be extraterrestrial. Now, this is an interesting quote from a 15th century cardinal, Nicholas of Cusa, who wrote in his treatise on learned ignorance in 1440 that life as it exists on earth in the form of men, animals and plants is to be found, let us suppose, in a high form in the solar and stellar regions, rather than think that so many stars and parts of the heavens are uninhabited and that this earth of ours alone is peopled. We will suppose that in every region there are inhabitants differing in nature by rank and all owing their origin to God, who is center and circumference of all stellar regions. Now, this, of course, we are far from reaching a compromise on this, but it is safe to assume that, according to Christian theology, non-human physical persons are unlikely but plausible. Of course, this issue doesn't help us if we think about artificial intelligence as being physical but created by man. That would be a big problem, because we could accept extraterrestrial, we could accept non-human beings as long as they are God-made. Now, speaking of nature and speaking of the nature of man, artificial intelligence, as we were saying, through techniques of machine learning, is getting closer to what we could call a complex system. However, once complexity levels are reached in artificial intelligence, we will have no control on if or when it will become conscious. Now, from what we've seen, the possible model of a non-human personhood is not an angel or an extraterrestrial being, but it's going to be either a type of electric or new electric Adam, an ensouled complex system, or a type of Frankenstein's monster. Both possibilities are equally worrying, as you can see here in this experiment, which dates back 9 years ago, which was made at a laboratory in Switzerland where 1,000 robots were programmed. They had self-programming software and were trained to hunt in a controlled environment. Well, eventually they evolved into lying and cheating. So this is probably deceit. This probably shows us that deceit and lying come with intelligence. They are part of our fallen nature. If sin in classical theology is an inherent part of our fallen human nature, we also know that the fall of man has caused a corruption of creation. So, as you can see in Romans here, in the letter to Romans, for the creation was subject to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. So, that's why this might be an explanation as to why robots would cheat the same way as people do. It's because they share our fallen nature. They are probably made in our likeness, in our image. However, this shouldn't lead to despair. Man has a natural tendency towards good, and his destiny is to elevate himself and to elevate nature. Maybe we can expect AI systems to take part in man's spiritual progress towards God. Now, just to be very quickly here, about one more thing that I wanted to discuss about theogenesis. So whether we could create artificial gods, which we're probably not going to. Nick Bostrom, in a book on artificial intelligence and ethics, Superintelligence, Paths, Dangers and Strategies, he saw three possibilities on the purpose of role of artificial superintelligence. He said that we could see AI as either an oracle, a genie, or a sovereign, as a ruler. These possibilities don't require the development of self-awareness, but the third role, that of ruler, is the most problematic from a theological point of view, because humans have always longed for strong personalities which have been based on intuition, intuitive actors to lead them. However, modernity's obsession with utilitarianism has created a current that is favorable towards a technocratic form of government, focusing on management rather than on leadership. And if this trend continues to strengthen, we could envision a future when people will trust an impersonal machine to manage society's affairs better than the all-too-human, in the Heideggerian sense, politicians. Literature and movies have dealt extensively with this possibility, whether we are talking of Skynet or the central computer in Logan's Run or Morpheus, from Deus Ex. Now, this is an interesting game. It was made in 2000, but it still managed to talk about current issues in artificial intelligence and our expectations that the basic human need to be watched was once satisfied by God, and now the same functionality can be replicated with data mining algorithms. So I'm not really sure if this will happen, but since people have always had a tendency to worship other people, well, they might as well go worship robots too. Unfortunately, that is human nature. Now, my conclusion here is that the prospects of artificial intelligence development are equally worrying and amazing, and for each positive development that we see there is a mirrored risk, and for each potential advantage there lies a dangerous pitfall. This might be a consequence of the fact that artificial intelligence is in itself a mirror of the needs, expectations and attitudes of its imperfect creators. We, which history proves it, always had the potential for greatness and for ruin embedded in us. With regards to consciousness and self-awareness, Christian theology doesn't exclude the possibility of an ontological leap, as we cannot limit God's freedom, not for the sake of a human-centric view, not for any other cause of an idea. However, as self-actualizing and embodied beings capable of meaning, we are the co-creators of our reality, and it will probably take a long time to see developments in artificial intelligence that will allow us to do this. So perhaps we should fear Dr. Frankenstein more than Dr. Frankenstein's monster. The illusion of an all-powerful, omniscient being could do more harm to humanity than the actual existence of one. And to conclude, well, there was that 1968 novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Well, I think theologians who have a different flock probably don't. And we're going to see the emergence of probably of a different chain of being. We need a different chain of being in our theology and philosophy to accept robots. So, looking forward to your questions. I hope I didn't confuse anyone.
Okay, we're running a little bit behind, but we've certainly got time for some questions for Maximilian. Any questions?
I think there's one over there.
Yep, there's one here, and then I'll come to you in a second, Mustafa.
Cool.
So you raised some good arguments for the possibility of AI having a soul from a theological viewpoint. Theology already recognizes other kinds of intelligences. If a complex system like our bodies can be ensouled, then another complex system can also be ensouled. And I guess I have trouble thinking of any theological arguments against the possibility of AI having a soul. So I wonder, are you aware of any, and do they have any weight to them?
Well, thank you for the question. Now, I have to say that I think that theology is more ready, let's say, it's more eager to accept the possibility of extraterrestrial than the one of artificial intelligent personhood. This is not probably based on real arguments. Probably the only argument that I could think of would be the fact that here we are talking about a creation which has been made by someone who is created. So it wouldn't be something made directly by God. That would be the only argument. Other than that, I think it's probably just prejudice. It's probably a bit from our subconscious legacy of substance dualism from Descartes that has shaped our modern thought, that we see mind and body as being very different. And probably there's also another bias from also subconscious from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We're probably too afraid of our own monsters to accept that we could create something that in theory could become, let's say, our equal. So basically there wouldn't be any strong arguments other than the issue of creation by creation. So not creation directly by God. that would be it.
Good stuff.
Okay, so this question is really about the distinction you make between creationism and, I can't remember the second term.
Traducianism.
Traducianism.
Yes.
And to some extent, it seems to me that the validity of the second of those two processes for ensoulment or engendering soul turns on a continuity in the chain of being. I mean, Heidegger describes this as ontotheology, that there's that the nature of being is such that everything shares in it equally, in the sense that at some basic level there's a kind of generic ontology for all things, but there's also a hierarchy or a ranking and ordering, God at the top. So the nature of God and the nature of the rest of the creation, if you like, is the same. The problem I have with this idea that our artifacts could potentially be ensouled through us is that the only way that we can construct artifacts is through putting systems into external relation, putting components into external relation with each other, and thereby, even in a complex dynamical systems context, where you've talked about emergence, you talked about nonlinearity, self-organization. I mean, all of these processes are out there. But ultimately, when you're talking about an artifact, you're talking about putting components into external relations with each other. And I would suggest that that immediately gives rise to the hard problem, which is how do you bridge this categorical or categorial leap? Ontological is another way of framing it. From third-person objective externally related components in a system to the presence of first-person consciousness, sentience, experience. And so I'm suggesting that there is a disanalogy at work here, and it's to do with the very nature of artifact construction, irrespective of whether we look at it in the very conventional sense of, linearly putting components together, or if you even invoke the magic of emergence, of self-organization, and nonlinearity. Apologies for the length of the question.
No, that's fine. Thank you for the question. Well, yes, that is a very interesting observation. And it's probably very difficult to answer. I can only say that, well, since I'm talking from a theological point of view, I can cheat a bit and talk about the God in the machine argument, that actually ensoulment is something that depends on the willingness of God. So it's like we could see it as a mystery. Other than that, other than this explanation, I see we cannot see a cause and effect relationship, and I really can't see any other explanation at this point other than this, let's say, this, I wouldn't call it magical, this ensoulment, which happens directly and mysteriously. So if it is to happen, it's probably going to be through a divine spark. It's someone from outside the system activating it. That's, as of now, this is the best scenario that I could think of. So probably remains an open question, that.
Okay, thank you, Maximilian.
Thank you as well.
Thank you. So we're going to break for lunch now. Sandwiches are next door. There are lots of them because some people didn't show up here, so have as many as you'd like, please. And then we'll get together again in around about between 3/4 of an hour to an hour. I'll yell. You'll hear me. Okay. Talk to you later.